Hello, Petals. How the devil are you? How are things going? Sorry it's been a while, but I've got COVID again, and I'm going to do my best to record, even though my voice is a bit naff. But we can still work it through and do lots of other characters, because I've got my hot cup of tea. I've got some fluids, and we'll get through this, because I'm getting so far behind. Oh my goodness, I can't be on with this. I was also like, yay, and then the next day I was like, meow. But as ever, please let me know how you're doing. Leave comments if you want to. Send me an email if you'd like. I hope you're all doing well, especially this time of year, which is this time of year. Okay, we're going to do our best, so bear with me, buckle in. My favourite phrase right now is buckle up, buttercup, we can do this thing. But if the voice is really bad, we can always redo this chapter when my voice gets better. It's no problem, it's fine. Let me know what you think at the end of it. We're gonna do this thing. It's a short chapter, so we'll be fine. Okie dokie. Chapter 3. Between the acting of a dreadful thing and its first motion, all the interim is like a phantasma or a hideous dream. The genius and the mortal instruments are then in council, and the state of man suffers the nature of an insurrection. "Oh, hell, why not?" said Jane suddenly, aloud, and crossed the road into the shop. "2 cream doughnuts, please," she said to the girl. "No, make that 3. The fresh cream, not the artificial." Eyes like molybdenum steel augers bored into her soul as she fumbled in her purse for a £1 coin, trying her inadequate best to look like someone who is buying cakes for 3 people, not just 1. "And penny change," said the girl. "Thank you." Well, Jane thought, as she walked on down the street, it seemed like a good idea at the time. "Eat a doughnut, girl," said the father of lies. "You won't know yourself afterwards." Whereas, in fact, her better part of reason told her the only perceptible change will be round the back of her buttocks. Girls who eat 3 cream doughnuts have only themselves to blame if they end up looking like hovercraft. Narrator's note: if you want to eat 3 cream doughnuts, you go ahead. If you want to work out, you go ahead. The most important thing that I've discovered in life is that it doesn't matter how healthy you eat, how well you look after yourself. Life will always tell you back to front and sideways what it wants you to do. So the thing is, do your best, and if you want to eat cream cakes, bloody well eat cream cakes. Rawr. "Never mind," Jane said firmly. A man in a fawn overcoat gave her a look and quickened his pace slightly. "Never mind," she repeated, sotto voce. "At least it isn't chocolate. When you start mainlining chocolate in the middle of the day, it's time to give up and die." Narrator's note: please don't do this, because it leaves a bit of a stain. I digress. She found a bench in the park, sat down, and looked at the paper bag on her knee. Cream had saturated it in patches for now, making the paper transparent, and she shuddered slightly. Had a tramp been passing just then, he would most certainly have been the recipient of unexpected charity, but there was nobody, except a couple of glue sniffers under a plane tree on the other side of the Oriental Pond, and the distant prospect of a jugger. She was going to have to eat them herself. Now, the first one wasn't too bad, although she was painfully aware that the cream had got out and was roaming around her face like a Dark Age horde. The second one wasn't too bad until about halfway through, and she abhorred waste, and you look such a fool walking around with 1.5 cream doughnuts in a paper bag. So she finished it, sent her tongue snow-ploughing through the sweet slush on her upper lip, and closed the bag firmly. She felt a little bit sick. "It's a symptom, you know," said a voice beside her. She jumped. It was bad enough being addressed by a strange man in a park. The fact that it was the same strange man who frightened her half to death the previous day by reading her mind and then walking away dry foot through a huge puddle only served to add inches to her takeoff. "Eating," the man went on, smiling. "Atavism. pure and simple. The hunter-gatherer inside us all reckons that if you've got something to eat, then that's all that matters. And so at the first sign of trouble, we reach for food. It's all stress-related, of course, and the things we eat make the stress worse. For a purely instinctive reaction, it's pretty counterproductive, wouldn't you say? Go away, Jane replied. You've got cream on your nose. I'll call a policeman. The man smiled. For all you know, he said, I am a policeman. Then I'll call another policeman. Go on, get lost. The man crossed his legs and folded his hands around the junction of his knees. Another slice of atavism, he said, although marginally more sensible. What a mess humanity is. He vanished. In the ensuing cloud of mental static, Jane became aware that she had somehow managed to sit on the third cream doorknot. It's odd the way you notice things like that. Where have you gone? She said. I haven't gone anywhere, replied the voice. Did you realise you're sitting on... Yes. There you go, said the voice. Telepathy. We can really get a move on now, don't you think? Jane stood up to walk away, turned and brushed ineffectually at the adherent doorknot. Narrators know I frickin' love that word, adherent. Don't you dare, she said. I wasn't going to, replied the voice. Being a spirit, I am not susceptible to mortal desires, and even if I was, I'm not sure removing flattened cream cakes from the back ends of people would be quite my thing. If you sit down again, nobody will see you've got a donut sticking to your... Jane sat down. She did not like this one little bit. But of all the things she was not afraid. Well, she said. The air hung around her, empty and quite blatantly transparent. She began to wonder whether... Sorry, said the voice. I was forgetting. I'm still here. Jane stared straight in front of her. Are you a ghost? She said. No, said the air. The term ghost implies someone who is dead. Never having been alive, I cannot be dead. Next question. Jane turned her head and looked sorely around. There wasn't a tree or a bush for 10 yards around, so it wasn't some silly fool ventriloquizing. The voice was quite soft, but distinctly external. She didn't know what voices inside your head sound like, but this was definitely an outside broadcast. She turned her head back and continued to stare forwards. Well, she repeated. If you continue sitting on that donut, the voice replied, it'll ruin your skirt. Compacted fresh dairy cream and gabardine don't go, or so they tell me. If you go away, she said, I will remove the donut. While you stay here, visible or not, I have no intention of indulging your warped sense of humour. There was a long silence, and then the voice spoke again. This time, though, it was definitely inside. Happy now? It said. Certainly not, Jane replied. Go away. I just did, replied the voice. I went back to the office. I'm making myself a cup of tea. What the hell more do you want? Don't you dare make a cup of tea inside my mind, Jane replied. I won't have it. Understand? What'll you do then? Blow your nose? Jane wriggled violently in her seat, trying to dislodge the doorknot. Inside her head she could feel laughter. Stop that, she said. You'll give me a headache. The walls of her skull stopped vibrating. As far as she could tell, the doorknot was still there. Who are you? She asked. Her brain hummed, and the message when it came through was wordless and vague, repellent but attractive too. What remained of her defence mechanisms prompted her not to understand it. Very well, said the voice, audible inside her head once more. Here's 3 clues for you. Talk of me and I appear. The proverbial alternative to me is a lot of sea water, and like your average cream bun, I have a tendency to take the hindmost, or at least, the voice corrected itself, Those should help you identify your head of department. Actually, though, we're more of a team, a cult of personality, though I see, said Jean primly. I'm afraid I'm going to have to insist that you leave. You can't insist unless you've got an or else, replied the voice. What'll you do to me if you don't? I shall make the sign of the cross, Jane replied awkwardly. So there. The voice smiled. It was that sort of voice. It would have had a radio producer standing on its hands with pure joy. Can if you like, it replied. Won't do you the slightest bit of good, and I shall be bitterly offended. We have feelings, you know. All these spiritual stereotypes would be history in a significantly and truly enlightened society, but we're used to it. We make allowances. Can I get rid of you? Not really, the voice replied. I suppose you could get one of those portable stereo things with earphones and try and blast me out, but I'm not sure that wouldn't be counterproductive. I mean, I'm not vain, but which would you rather have banging about inside your head? Me or Def Leppard? Narrator's not, never a fan of Def Leppard. Great band, highly talented, just not my jam. Jane considered this. Are you planning on staying long? She asked. Because if you are, it might just be worth it. And there's other things beside heavy metal. Narrator's no, Def Leppard certainly weren't heavy metal. They were rock at best. Narrator. There is other things besides heavy metal that you can play loud, you know. I was on the train the other day with a man who was listening to Gotterdammerung on his Walkman. You could hear it buzzing away from the buffet car. Threats, said the voice cordially, are the last resort of the inadequate negotiator. Were you thinking of the salty recording, by the way, because I prefer it on balance to the Carahan? Why can't I get rid of you? Jane demanded. You'll make me late for work. You let me in, the voice replied. You listened to temptation. Did I? What you're sitting on proves it, replied the voice smugly. Go on, I said. Be a devil. I didn't actually mean it like that, of course, but you seem to have got the message. That makes sense, Jane replied thoughtfully. As a rule, I don't even like cream cakes. What are you doing here, anyway? Do you want me to sell you my soul or something? The voice laughed, making her hair shake slightly. My dear girl, said the voice, with genuine amusement. Why on earth should I want to do that? I can get souls any time I want. Trade. The public, it continued, have this peculiar idea that all we care about is souls. Me, I could take them or leave them. So what do you want? Jane demanded. I want, said the voice, to offer you a job. Jane caught her breath in amazement. Unfortunately, in doing so, she inhaled the last of the cream, huffed for about 1/10 of a second, and then sneezed mightily. When she had recovered from the shock, the voice had gone. Staff looked at his watch. Well, he said. There was a squelching noise, and Ganga materialised on the other side of the desk. Staff was amused and pleased that, for once, Ganga wasn't looking like a designer shirt advertisement. He was wet and shaken slightly, and his stiffed-up haircut had been blasted down over his forehead. Sorry I'm late, Ganga said. I got sneezed. That's all right, Staff replied equably. How did you get on? I'd say, Ganga replied, mopping himself with a handkerchief, that she's still thinking about it. Either that, or she's booking in at one of those places where they don't mind if you think you're a tree, just so long as you don't drop leaves on the stairs. Staff tapped his teeth with his pencil. But she didn't give you a decision. Lord, no, Ganga replied. Wouldn't have expected her to. In fact, he admitted, I'd only just introduced the subject when I had to split. It's typical of the problems I have with women, he added. I just get right up their noses, you know. Fine, said Staff to himself. I'd always wondered who writes the script for Spittin' Image, and now I know. But you did tell her about the job, he said. I mean, well, I mentioned it, Genghis shrugged. You can't rush these things. It's one of the lessons we've learned in our own mortal recruitment program. Anyone who wants the job really isn't going to be suitable. Staff nodded. So, he said. So, Ganga replied, reaching in his pocket for a comb. The next stage is we scare the poor kid absolutely shitless. You can leave that bit to me if you like. Staff pursed his lips. Is that going to be, absolutely essential? He asked. I know you lot are allowed to have a certain latitude in the way you do things, but over here we've got to watch ourselves. Ganga nodded briskly. Absolutely essential, he said. You've got to do that to induce the right ambience of mild paranoia. Like they say, nobody in their right mind would do this job anyway. Well, Staff opened the top left-hand drawer of his desk and found a peppermint. Let me know how you get on. Will do. The chair emptied itself. Staff sat for maybe 30 seconds looking at it. Then, with one smooth, easy movement, he reached into the open drawer, grabbed an inhaler, and sniffed ferociously. There was a sort of popping noise, a peculiar one, and Ganga was lying on his face on the floor beside him. Staff put the inhaler back in the drawer and closed it. Serves you right, he said. I thought I'd made it quite clear that I didn't want any of this mind-hacking stuff, but I suppose you didn't listen. In one ear and out of the other, that sort of thing. Ganga grinned ruefully and rubbed his knee. Force of habit, he said. Won't happen again. He got to his feet, dusted himself off, and walked to the door. By the way, he said, as he turned the handle and half inserted himself into the gap, while I was in there, I couldn't help noticing that stuff with the blue stockings and the polar bear. Very original. He closed the door just before the stapler hit it. In the Blue Mountains, high above the encircling plain, a woodcutter paused from his work and leaned on his axe. The sun, chugging along on 2 cylinders and with a pair of tights doing service for a fan belt, glinted on his curly red hair and fearless blue eyes. Far away a bird sang. Greetings, Cousin Bjorn, said a voice behind him. Yet another really beautiful day, is it not? Pleasantly mild, yet neither too hot for work, nor too cold for a moment, merely standing and listening to the voice of the stream as it laughs its way down the hillside to a tranquil village. Drop dead, Olaf, Bjorn replied. Olaf shrugged. It is a pity that one so young and so blessed by nature should be as sour at heart as a green apple, he observed tolerantly. Nevertheless, I am sure that sooner or later you will overcome your internal anguish and find true peace. In the meantime, there is wood to be cut. He shouldered his axe and walked away down the hill, whistling a folk tune. Bjorn could take a hint. He lifted the axe, whirled it round his head, and brought it down on the base of the tree. The head flew off and landed in the crystal waters of the stream. How unfortunate, observed a white-haired, rosy-cheeked woodcutter who had been tying his shoe behind a venerable elm. Yes, Bjorn agreed. Another 18 inches to the left, and it would have taken your leg off. The elder, whose name was Carl, sighed, seated himself on a tree trunk, and motioned the young man to join him. Hostility, he said, offering Bjorn an apple, is like a rough-handled axe. It wounds those you use it against, and it blisters the hands of the user. Try and be a little more peaceful within yourself, Cousin Bjorn. Life is a wonderful thing. Apples give me guttache, Bjorn replied, especially bloody coxes. He threw the apple away over his shoulder. Now, would you mind shifting yourself, because if you don't, you're going to be right under this tree when I chop the bugger down. Carl shook his head and smiled. You'll have to find your axe head first, cousin. Always remember that, he added as he got up and he walked away. Always find your axe head before you start to cut down your tree. Bjorn made a rude noise and stomped across to the stream. It took him quite some time to find the axe head, during which his shoes got absolutely soaked. Good morning, Uncle Bjorn, said a voice above his head. He looked up to see a little girl, about 10 years old, in a pretty blue dress. Mother thought you might be hungry, so she sent you some food. If you would like a refreshing draught of beer, I can run back to the house and get some for you. Bjorn lifted the napkin and made a face.
Leave it over there, he said, and tell the dozy cow I can't stand waffles, right? Waffles give me wind.
The girl nodded. Uncle Bjorn, she said, I was running blithely through the woods just now, and I saw a beautiful flower, as blue as the heavens themselves. Look, I picked it to show you. It's such a lovely flower. I'm sure there must be a wonderful story about it and how it got its name.
It's called dungwort,
Bjorn replied.
Use your imagination.
Oh, the girl curtsied prettily. Well, she said, I'd better be going back to the house before Mother wonders where I've got to. Do be careful with that great sharp axe.
Scram!
The girl curtsied again and danced off down the hill, leaving Bjorn alone lost with his trees, the birds, the squirrels, and his ingrowing toenail. For a while he stood and looked aimlessly about him until his eye lit on one tree that he recognised. It was a tall, ancient oak, and he remembered it well. He had climbed it as a boy, and his grandfather had often lifted him up into its branches, pointing out to him all the marvellous things he could see. How wonderful it is, his grandfather used to say, to sit in a high tree and look out over the kingdoms of the world as if one were God's own eyes. Bjorn braced his feet, grinned, and set about cutting it down. Eh? Well, I hope that was okay. I hope you enjoyed it. And I'm looking forward to being able to bring you another one very, very soon, in a couple of days. I'm trying to do it in a couple of days. I am on the mend. I am on the mend. I just still feel a bit wonky. But everything will be okay. Everything's fine. It's been a year, has it not? But please let me know how you're doing, how things are going, what's going on, and all the tickety-boos and stuff and nonsenses and things. So take care. We're supposed to have snow here tomorrow afternoon. I was a bit disappointed with our last snowfall. Didn't do so well for me. But, yeah, hopefully the next one will be less of a dusting and more of a deluge. Wouldn't mind that very much. Apart from the fact the power goes out. Can't be on with that. Anyway, I'll stop whinging in the morning and I'll be back in a couple of days. So keep warm if it's cold. Keep hydrated if it's too hot. And take it easy. See you soon, Petal.